Oh my gosh. We're back trailblazing.
Yes.
Trailblazing with our friend Ryan Hill.
Yes, we're super excited to have Ryan Hill here. He is the CEO of Ryan Hill Coaching.
Thus the name.
Yes, you might recognize the name in that. But and he does business coaching, he does personal coaching. We're really excited to have him here. So welcome, Ryan.
Thank you. Thrilled to be here. Very thrilled to be here. Thanks so much, Gail and Bruce.
Oh, and for the record, Ryan is the very good friend of a good friend of ours, Todd Porch of Strategist. We happen to be in the same DU MBA program, although I graduated a little before Ryan did.
Don't call your age out. It's
old.
good. Ryan, tell us about you. Tell us about yourself, a little bit about your background and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to. So I spent the first 20 years of my career in the military, specifically the U.S. Army. A variety of roles and positions. Started enlisted doing artillery work. Once I lost enough of my hearing, I decided to shift over into logistics. Ended up going the officer route. Had the opportunity to teach hand-to-hand combat and leadership development at the United States Military Academy at West Point, which was a phenomenal experience to be up there. And eventually decided time to see what the civilian world is all about. Been out in the civilian world for about 7 years now, 8 years, and have been in a variety of positions from consulting, management consulting for the built environment, to running global leadership development for the world's largest gold mining company, and then fairly recently helping take a tech company from private to public and building out their leadership development programs and helping to institutionalize coaching into the fabric of the company. And all that has led to finally scratching this itch that I've had for many, many years. This idea of what if I were to hang my own shingle? What if I were to try and do this and take all this experience and learnings and think about how do I make this the most impactful for people, teams, organizations? Because one thing I've seen a lot of is that we go into a workshop that's amazing or a program that's amazing, but it's just a few days.
Mm-hmm.
And then we go back to being the way that we were. And so I've always been thinking about how do I drag out that ROI? How do I make that as long tail as possible? And I thought that, well, maybe I need to do that on my own because I can work with the clients who understand that behavior change takes time. Give you an example, people who quit smoking cold turkey, only about 4 to 7% are actually successful because it's behavior change that doesn't happen on a dime. Rather, you need that sustainment over time for it to have long-lasting effects. So I thought the way to do that was to start open my own shop, open my own practice. So I've been in this consulting, coaching place under my own name for a few months now that I founded with the idea of, again, helping individuals, teams, organizations make smart leadership choices so they don't literally pay for them down the road, help them achieve what they're trying to achieve, and figure out what is a better way to do this with the resources that we have.
Oh, we are so excited for you, Ryan, and the world needs you. That's the good news. We come from the same modeling of behavior. That behavior takes time. We often put it in the sports realm, where how long does it take you to learn how to play the game of golf, as example?
Your whole life.
Yeah, and it takes
your
forever.
Whole
like
life.
It's still going. Or if you were to ask people, how long does it take you to learn how to play the piano? Everybody says practice. Yeah. And yet, when we talk about some of these softer leadership skills or softer skills around listening, et cetera, people don't want to practice those. They just go, I'm good. I can hear just fine.
So I have a question for you. First of all, I love that you have a military background that moves into the leadership realm. We have a study that we love and we reference about followership within the military and the power in leadership to be a follower as well and to teach followership. I'd love to ask you, what's the one that bubbles to the top thing that you can think of? And I know there's several from the military that you feel like is just a beautiful, transitions beautifully into leadership itself and the work that you do in business today.
Good question, Gail. I think what surfaces pretty quickly is this idea of, well, it's a saying that says, is lead, follow, or get the hell out of the way, quite frankly. And so it kind of speaks to what you talked about as far as that followership and the importance there, and that you've got to pick it. I mean, how many times have we heard how many chefs can be in the kitchen, or there are too many chefs in the kitchen? So this idea that just know where you're at, just that self awareness to be like, hey, I'm in charge, so I'm going to actually be in charge, or I'm not in charge, so I need to let those who are be in charge.
Yes.
And figuring that out, your space there is just as important because in the military, you could think that, well, there's such a hierarchical organization that you could play rock, paper, rank, and whoever has the highest rank wins every time. And that's true to an extent, but there's always that voice of reason, there's always that voice of experience that sometimes isn't the highest ranking. And that's not a bad thing, but how that interaction and that interplay and that relationship is between the person who has the authority and the person who has the responsibility is huge. And you see that in the boardroom and the C-suite as well. That there's the person who's actually in charge and the person who has the influence. And sometimes they're different. And so how that interplay is and the recognition there, that can make or break the meeting, the quarter, the company.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Yeah,
that's perfect.
I also love that, sometimes we're challenged with the thought that, hey, we're going to let someone make a decision and then everybody leaves the boardroom to talk crap about that decision and why it was a bad decision. So, there's no way for it to succeed because nobody's following. Nobody's doing that, as Gail mentioned earlier, that concept of followership. Now, you mentioned something in your intro that I want to go back to, if you don't mind, which was you taught at West Point hand-to-hand combat and leadership. Now, what that sounded like to me was that was one class and not two. Were they two separate classes?
Well, when diplomacy doesn't work, that's when the warfighter enters. So it's all wrapped together.
Man, let me tell you what a leader really ought to do.
Exactly. No, there were two separate classes, two separate subjects. The hand-to-hand combat, the military teaches a style of combatives that's very similar to MMA, mixed martial arts. If you watch the league is UFC, where you basically start off standing and there kind of are no rules. I'm sure there might be a few, but it's punching, striking, takedown. Once you get to the ground, how do you submit your opponent? That's the style of combat that the military teaches because it is the most effective, is the most impactful. I had a background in doing some fighting on a beginner minor league circuit, if you will.
Wow.
But I was on a fight circuit for a while, so they brought me in to help teach that at West Point as a foundation because everybody goes through and everybody learns at least the basics of that. Some love it and they lean into it, as I did a bit way back in the day. Others say, what's the box I need to check? And we go a different direction. And that's fine. So that was one class. Another class was leadership, where we talked about all the things that we talk about now in life, in what you're doing with ExperienceYes and what I'm doing with Ryan Hill Coaching, because good leaders are good leaders, whether you're in the military or not. A good leader has the same attributes, characteristics, and traits, regardless of sector or industry, public or private. So we would teach those fundamentals. We'd bring real world examples, having come from the operational environment into the academic environment. We'd have relevant real world examples that we could bring with us. I spent several years deployed in the Middle East prior to getting to West Point. So I had a lot of stories and experiences that I could bring to build up case studies and to talk through scenarios that these young men and women, these cadets, will be faced with in the future.
Yeah, I love that so much. And a couple of things. I have a very strange and kind of secretive obsession with UFC. So
no, it's weird.
I love it.
I love UFC. She's passionate about UFC.
Our son was a wrestler and then he did Brazilian jiu-jitsu. And so it's a thing. I have to say, I love it. And it's horribly violent sometimes. And so I don't always admit that. And here it is out in the open. Number two, I am really curious if earlier we were kind of talking about the work that we do with leaders. One of the things that we do is help teach how to manage uncertainty. And there can be a lot of uncertainty in some of the scenarios that you talked about. What is one thing that you might help leaders understand or use as a tool to manage in ambiguity?
Good question. And I eventually want to go back to number one about this obsession with USC. We don't have to now. At some point, I'd love to go back there and explore
Promise.
that a little further. So just we can put that on the side.
Totally can.
But to address number two, as far as uncertainty, the first thing is just recognize it, just acknowledge it, say, hey, this is here, this exists, and to pretend it doesn't would be disingenuous, and you're not going to be successful because across all of life there's uncertainty. I know I'm talking to two parents, and I'm a parent as well, and talking about uncertainty. It doesn't matter how long you've been a parent for. There's always uncertainty with being a parent, with being in a relationship, a committed relationship, with so many facets of life have uncertainty. So just acknowledging that this is a human condition that is normal, that everybody has. It's supposed to happen. There's never a point in life when you have 100% certainty. There's always some kind of a balance. And so one of the tools that I like to leverage is to have people write out what is certain for them.
Mm.
What are you certain of? The love within your marriage or with your partner, the relationship with your family, the certainty of getting outside, get fresh air, to be out and exercise and how that feels. Whatever is on your list, those are a few that are on my list. Write out what those certainties are. Because if you can ground yourself, anchor yourself to the certainties you have, you're much better prepared to go after the uncertainties that are out there.
Hmm. That's
love,
great.
love
Yes,
that.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think that's great. And I think we all need those kinds of reminders, those tools to kind of help inform us that it's going to be okay. We're going to get through it. We talk a lot about how as soon as the brain recognizes we didn't die from that experience that was very uncertain, it starts to have a little bit of muscle towards managing that uncertainty and knowing that the next time they're presented with something incredibly ambiguous, it's like, oh, I've been here before and I didn't die. So I think I'll be okay again.
I'll make it. That's right. That's right. I'm curious, Ryan, as you've gone through that, that transition from the military to the business world, what have you noticed are the biggest differences from a leadership perspective when you look at those two worlds?
Maybe just one. Maybe one big difference.
Okay.
One
or
big
90
difference.
big differences.
Yes.
No.
90. Okay. We'll start. We'll compromise. Do 49.
Good.
Okay.
Opportunity. I think that's the biggest one. I was given the opportunity to command a company of 200 soldiers when I was 26 years old.
Wow.
And this was train them for a year and then take them to Afghanistan for another year. So these were big missions. These were a big ask. I had the opportunity to do that. I was also given the opportunity to be developed as a leader so that when I showed up at the age of 26, I could do right by them. And in the civilian world, oftentimes I have seen there is a lack of opportunity or a lack of developmental opportunities. So we often have this perspective of, well, you're a good individual contributor, so let me put you in charge of other people, but I'm not going to set you up for success. I'm not going to help you understand what does that mean to lead somebody? What does that mean to be the leader in the one-on-one? What does that mean to provide feedback, to do a performance review and talk about what does this score mean? And also, how do you just get better? What are your goals? How may I support you in your career so you get the bullets on your resume that you need to advance over the next 3, 5, 10 years? And we don't give them that opportunity. And it's not that the people in the military, the leaders in the military, are so much better as being leaders. We're all people. They're given the opportunity to develop as leaders. They're given the training, the resources that oftentimes we don't see in the business world because it's hard to tie to the bottom line sometimes, which is where I think that coaches, consultants, they have a duty to show the data, show me the money, as Jerry Maguire would say, show me the data as to how does it benefit your company and your bottom line to develop your leaders to set them up for success.
That is
opportunity comes to mind.
Yes, that is fantastic. And I love that. Of course, it's a wonderful plug for the work that you do and we do. And we know it. And I think it's such a great example. I already adored you before this call. I now triple adore you because I think you're so right. Let's stop promoting individual, high performing individual contributors without giving them the framework and the support to be successful in their next role. And let's also stop throwing people in these 1-hour classes and then expecting them to go be performative immediately. Let's start thinking about it like behavioral change, like you were talking about. So we have just one more question for you, and that is, we would love to know, in your past, and it can be, now as a coach, way back when, early military or even pre, what is the best piece of advice that you've been given? And and why was it given to you? Whether there's a story there.
What was going on that made someone say, I'm going to give you a little piece of advice?
What comes to mind is early in my career as a young lieutenant, I was in Iraq, and my boss's boss had a nickname of Tasmanian Devil.
Oh.
If you remember the Looney Tunes character, it was a tornado and would just like suck things in, they'd spew them out, mangled, destroyed. And I was pretty frustrated because my boss was a great leader and there were great leaders all around us. But I perceived my boss's boss to be a toxic leader, somebody who you didn't want to follow their example. And I was just dismayed at the state of things. My boss pulled me aside and he said, well, Ryan, it's actually really good that you have this opportunity to learn from this particular leader. I'm like, you're crazy. I mean, sir, you're crazy. With all due respect. And he talked about how valuable the data points are from somebody who doesn't do things the way you want to do things. And that while it's great to have that leader that you want to emulate and that you admire and you look up to and you say, that's who I want to be. That's my aspiration to be that leader at some point. It is amazing to have those types of role models and examples. But those are data points. Those aren't good data points. They're just data points. And having the toxic leader in your life, not saying that that's something that I wish upon everyone, but to have that opportunity, if you can perceive it as this isn't a bad experience, these are data points. And I understand that I had a buffer, so my life, I was deployed in Iraq for 15 months. I was going to say it wasn't miserable, but it wasn't peachy. But I understand there are definitely toxic leadership environments where you've got to get out of there right away. Yeah. But what data points can you gain from that? And that was the advice that I got, was that it's not good data or bad data, it's all data. So just take it in and use that to figure out, who am I? I want to take this piece from this person, this piece from that person, ignore that data point over there, definitely ignore that one, but be aware of it to make sure I don't slide in that direction. So the advice of just viewing it as experiences and data points, and then I get to choose how to interpret it. That was the best that I got.
Yeah,
that's fantastic.
As a young management consultant, I was on a project where I had, I'll say toxic leader. I think that's an accurate way to describe it. And a similar response from a mentor who said, you're going to learn something from this person. And I thought, there's nothing that I can learn from this person. And this person would dress you down, up and down in public. They would do it in front of the customer or the client. It was bad. And I learned a lot about what not to do. I also learned that it was necessary to speak up when something was wrong. And that was a very valuable lesson where I didn't have a lot of courage back then because I was a young consultant. I didn't understand that if something was wrong, it was important to say it, and especially at the client level. And that's, I think it's kind of echoing what you're saying is, even though it's a terrible situation, there's still stuff, if you can make it through without detriment to your personal well-being.
Oh yeah. Well, and Ryan,
you're going to learn something.
You called it opportunity about 80 times, and I know that's intentional, and I love that. There's an opportunity here. I love that so much.
There is so much, and you're right. It's so much harder when you're young and early in your career. But what a huge learning, Bruce, to be able to say, hey, if you see something, say something, because it's not okay to let that slide, because then you start to go against your morals, your values, and that's the kind of stuff that keeps you up at night.
Yep.
Yes, 100%. Ryan, this has been such a wonderful conversation. I have no doubt whatsoever you are very quickly going to fill your calendar and be overwhelmed with the amount of people you'll be coaching, because you have such a great energy and a great perspective that is so needed today.
And don't mess with him because he will keep you down.
Because the octagon.
It's going to
because the octagon, cage fighting.
That's right. It's not
the 10th coaching session. We go kidding, we don't.
That would be a fascinating. That would be a really interesting model, Ryan, just to think about. Hey, we're going to get leaders together. We're going to teach you about leadership, and by the end of the week, you get into the octagon.
I don't know about that. I don't know. You'd have to
about experiential learning. Let's use that as a data point. See what happens. It's not good data or bad data. It's just data.
That's right.
Yeah, you'd have to put me in one of those sumo suits that's completely encompassed in air, so I could just roll around because that would terrify me. Watching is one thing.
The first thing about Leadership Fight Club is there is no leadership fight club.
I'm updating my website now.
Yay.
Well, it's been a pleasure, Ryan. Thank you.
Thank you both very much. I appreciate it.
Take care. Bye.